Hello, and welcome back to I Completed 80s Music, with me, the 80s Mixtaper. For those experiencing the pod for the first time, let me set the scene. In 2016, I decided to listen to every single single from the UK charts from the 31st of December 1979 to the 31st of December 1989. I'd lived through Britpop as a teen in the 90s, but didn't really feel I knew the 80s as well as I should, hence the challenge. Well, over 3,000 singles later, some disco, ska, two-tone, new romantics, rock, rap, funk, hair metal, acid house, the creation of pop as we know it, I was done. This podcast, therefore, picks up the best, most iconic, most fun, and most weird tunes of the decade, and we look at them under a microscope of hindsight. Buckle in. Today, we're in the last breaths of the early part of 1980 and into April, with Playlist 8, the link for which, for Spotify and Apple, you can find in the episode description. It's a heady blend of disco, ska, yacht rock, early metal, the downright weird, a little early pop, and the final vestiges of punk. As always, if you can give me a follow on whatever platform you listen on, that would be wonderful, and check me out on Instagram and Twitter as the 80s Mixtaper. Let's get into it. Let's start today by getting our eye in. Let's limber up a little, get those disco muscles going. Goodness knows at my age you can pull one in moments. Just the other day I put my back out, coughing. Let's explore a shimmering gem that perfectly encapsulated the twilight of disco's golden era, Bobby Thurston's Check Out the Groove. Let's give it a listen now. Track 1, Playlist 8. Now, if you don't know Bobby Thurston, here's a brief primer. Thurston wasn't exactly a household name, but he was one of those under-the-radar artists who delivered absolute bangers in the late 70s and early 80s. Think of him as a stealth missile in the disco arsenal, subtle, sharp, and devastatingly funky. A Washington, D.C. native, Thurston grew up surrounded by the city's vibrant go-go scene, and you can feel that rhythmic pulse in everything he touched. Robert Bobby Thurston was born in Washington, D.C. in 1954, a city that had music embedded in its DNA. Growing up in the capital's thriving cultural landscape, Thurston was heavily influenced by the sounds of soul, funk, and the burgeoning go-go movement, a percussive, rhythm-heavy genre that would define DC's music scene for decades. Thurston's introduction to music was steeped in these rich traditions. He began singing in local groups during his high school years, gaining a reputation for his smooth vocals and natural charisma. He idolised soul legends like Marvin Gaye and Curtis Mayfield, whose influence is palpable in his later work. By the mid-70s, Thurston was collaborating with other up-and-coming artists in DC's vibrant music scene. His big break came when he caught the attention of producers Willie Lester and Rodney Brown. The duo, known for their ability to craft impeccably smooth disco and funk tracks, saw potential in Thurston and brought him into the studio. His debut album, Sweetest Piece of the Pie, was released in 1978. It was a promising start, blending disco grooves with soulful ballads, showcasing Thurston's vocal versatility. Tracks like Sweetest Piece of the Pie and Keep It Going hinted at the musical sophistication he would later achieve. Though the album didn't catapult him into stardom, it helped establish his niche as an artist capable of delivering polished, danceable music with emotional depth. This partnership with Lester and Brown proved to be a creative goldmine. For his sophomore album, You Got What It Takes, released in 1980, Thurston leaned heavily into the disco-funk fusion that was dominating dance floors at the time. It was on this record that Check Out the Groove emerged, a track that would define his career and solidify his place as one of the genre's unsung heroes. Check Out the Groove was released in 1980 on Epic Records, right as disco was about to face its much publicised death knell. But Thurston wasn't having any of that. This track is pure defiance, a shiny, infectious testament to the enduring power of the dance floor. The song itself is a masterpiece of groove-centric production. It opens with a tantalising bass line, the sort of thing which gets pinched by Will Smith for a noughties blockbuster. Smooth and seductive, paired with a hypnotic four-on-the-floor beat. It's the kind of intro that demands you close your eyes and let your shoulders start moving. And then Bobby's silky voice slides in, effortlessly cool, as if he's inviting you to the most exclusive club you've ever heard of. The lyrics are simple, almost sparse. Check out the groove, make your body move. But let's not overthink it. The simplicity is the point, the groove itself is the star, and Thurston knows it. The song builds with jubilant energy, the strings soar, and the whole track feels like the soundtrack to a Saturday night that stretches into eternity. Behind the boards, you had the magic touch of Willie Lester and Rodney Brown, two producers who knew how to make a record feel lush, but never overproduced. They kept the focus on the rhythm section, tight and relentless, with just enough embellishment to keep things interesting. Commercially, Check Out the Groove didn't break into the mainstream the way some of the era's bigger disco tracks did, but it became a staple in clubs and on dance floors across Europe, especially in the UK, where it charted modestly but left an outsized impression. Funk and soul aficionados, especially crate diggers, still talk about it in hushed tones of reverence. Check Out the Groove captures a very specific cultural moment. By 1980, disco was under siege. Disco Demolition Night had happened a year earlier, and the backlash was real. But artists like Bobby Thurston kept the torch burning, evolving the genre into what would become boogie and early 80s funk. His music bridges the gap between disco's flamboyance and the sleeker, synth-driven R&B and funk sounds that followed. Today, Check Out the Groove is a timeless reminder of what made disco unstoppable at its peak. It's about liberation, joy, and the universal language of the dance floor. Next up, back with one of my favourite ska bands and one of the most beautiful but sadness-tinged moments of the ska revival, Missing Words by the Selector. Let the open chords of this track ring in your ear as Pauline Black dials the phone, but no one answers back. This is track 2. Now imagine this. It's Coventry, England, in the late 1970s. The city is reeling from deindustrialisation. Thatcher is lurking on the horizon like a grim political storm cloud, and youth culture is exploding with discontent. Enter Two Tone Records, a tiny label with a massive mission. Founded by Jerry Dammers of the Specials, Two Tone was the rallying cry for a generation of disillusioned kids, a multiracial musical revolution blending Jamaican ska and reggae with punk's relentless energy. Bands like Madness, The Beat, and of course The Specials, who we've all already seen, were on the roster. But then you had the Selector, the dark horse, the wild card. The Selector were a swaggering, sharp-dressed collective led by Pauline Black, whose voice could slice through a crowd of pogoing fans like a knife through butter. We met Pauline Black back in episode 5.5. Black wasn't just the lead singer, she was a trailblazer, a black woman fronting a band in the testosterone-heavy, often racially charged world of punk and ska. That was no small feat. She stood out, and she made damn sure the Selector would too. Missing Words was the third single from their debut album, Too Much Pressure, released in 1980. The track opens with that clean, hypnotic, guitar open chord, like a polite knock on the door before the song bursts in like an uninvited party guest. It's ska at its most addictive. Upstrokes, syncopation, and a groove that makes you want to move, even if you're standing in line at the post office. But Missing Words isn't about making you dance. It's about heartbreak. The lyrics, Pauline Black delivers them with a mix of cool detachment and quiet devastation. Quote, "Now I'm not the honest Joe I might seem. I can't take your lies. It's late, I'm tired. Your words just cackle along the wire." End quote. It's not just a breakup song. It's a masterclass in restrained emotional carnage. There's no shouting, no melodrama, just the kind of understated pain that feels like someone closing a door quietly, but firmly in your face. Missing Words might not just be about personal relationships. In the larger context of two-tone, it's hard not to hear it as a metaphor for the political and social disconnects of the time. Black youth in England were grappling with systematic racism, police harassment, and unemployment, while the older generation seemed unwilling or unable to even acknowledge the problem. Those missing words, maybe they're the conciliation that never came. The single hit number 23 on the UK charts, and while that might not sound earth-shattering, for a ska band on an indie label, it was a big deal. Let's talk about the music video for a second. Black and her bandmates decked out in their signature monochrome outfits, performing with an intensity that was impossible to fake. While it is mainly a video of a band on a soundstage, the chord strikes at the beginning, intercut with someone dialing a phone, and then cutting back to the band is worth it alone. So why does Missing Words still resonate today? Maybe it's because in an era of oversharing and Instagram oversaturation and platitudes, there's something refreshing about a song that says so much with so little. Or maybe it's because we're still grappling with the same issues the Selector was singing about 40 years ago. Unfortunately, this is the last time we'll see the Selector on this podcast, and while it pains me to say this is symptomatic of what I'm about to say. The operation was a success, but the patient died on the operating table. In other words, the two-tone revival, whilst joyous and wonderful, was also very short-lived. Sure, we'll hear more from ska over the rest of 1980, but very quickly it peters out as tastes moved on. The specials will evolve, as we'll see, into something completely different, and even Madness quickly move away from the true roots of ska. But I have a soft spot for the Selector, and Missing Words is my favourite of their songs. Let's now take a moment to talk about our third and final song by Dr. Hook, Sexy Eyes, a song that dropped in 1980 like a warm, disco-tinged breeze, just as the sun was setting on the polyester decade. This is the kind of track that could only exist at the crossroads of the 70s and 80s, where smooth AM radio vibes collided with the last gasp of dancefloor hedonism. This is track 3, Playlist 8. Dr. Hook, or Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show if you're feeling formal, we've met twice before, and this will be the third and final time. Firstly, we had Better Love Next Time in episode 1.5, and When You're in Love with a Beautiful Woman in 2.5. They were the band that gave us the cover of Rolling Stone back in 72, a tongue-in-cheek ode to rock stardom, which, spoiler alert, actually got them on the cover of Rolling Stone. But by the time they reached Sexy Eyes, they were a different animal altogether, out with the scrappy countercultural rock and roll circus, in with the laid-back purveyors of love songs and radio gold. Sexy Eyes is the third single from Sometimes You Win, an album that leans heavily into what we now call yacht rock. It's all about a smooth groove, velvety harmonies, and a hint of disco shimmer. Imagine being at a bar in 1980. You've got a Tom Collins in one hand, a dance floor beckoning under the glow of a mirrored ball. That's Sexy Eyes in a nutshell. It's a seduction song, yes, but it's the kind of seduction song you play when you're already halfway to being in love, or at least infatuated enough to make it through the night. Written by Chris Waters and Keith Stagel, the track is an exercise in precision-crafted pop. Those lyrics, "I was sitting all alone, watching people get it on," set the stage for a scene that's part Casablanca, part Studio 54. There's longing, sure, but it's delivered with a wink. The hook is unstoppable, with the slow dance light melody weaving its way through like it's closing time at the roller rink. Sexy Eyes was a hit. It peaked at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 and climbed to number 4 on the Adult Contemporary chart. This was Dr. Hook's bread and butter by this point, crafting the kind of song that made you smile, sway, and maybe just feel a little bit sexy yourself. Unfortunately, it was also alleged they got stuck on, and unable to evolve, this was to be their swan song in this countdown of 80s music. And Sexy Eyes also feels like the last hurrah of an era. By 1980, disco was fading and the pop world was veering towards synths and spandex. Dr. Hook with their easygoing charm and playful sensuality, were already an anachronism, a relic of a more carefree time. Next, we're turning the volume up to 11, strapping on some leather and diving headfirst into a 1980s classic, Judas Priest's Living After Midnight. This song isn't just a heavy metal anthem, it's a template for all leather-clad metal, a shot of adrenaline to the heart of a generation that just wanted a party after hours. It's all meat, no filler, and undeniably one of the most infectious riffs to emerge from the new wave of British heavy metal. Let's break it down. This is track 4, playlist 8. First, some context. Judas Priest released Living After Midnight as a single in March 1980, a centrepiece of their album British Steel. The album was recorded at Tittenhurst Park, a stately English mansion owned by Ringo Starr and John Lennon. Yes, you heard that right, this heavy metal milestone was born in the hallowed halls of Beatledom. The story of the song's creation is as quintessentially rock and roll as it gets. Legend has it that bassist Ian Hill was strumming the riff late at night and it woke Rob Halford from his slumber. Halford, being the nocturnal poet he is, came down, growled, "What is that?" and boom, the lyrics started flowing. The title itself is a nod to their fans' late-night lifestyle, a celebration of defiance, freedom, and let's be honest, some beer-fueled antics. Musically, Living After Midnight is a tightly packed powder keg. It's not the most pretty thing Judas Priest ever did. This isn't a prog metal odyssey with 10 time signature changes. No, it's lean, mean, and gloriously direct. The main riff, pure earworm magic. Simple enough to hum in your sleep, but impossible to get out of your head. Glenn Tipton and KK Downing's guitars roar with a kind of controlled chaos, and Dave Holland's drum beat locks you into that mid-tempo fist-pumping groove. And Halford, his voice is the leather and chrome heart of this track. He doesn't oversing it. Instead, he lets the lyrics, "Gonna set the night on fire," do the heavy lifting. It's not about vocal gymnastics. It's about conviction, about embodying the spirit of the song. This dude makes you believe that he is living after midnight, and spoiler alert, he probably was. Let's linger on Rob Halford for a while. Rob Halford, often hailed as the metal god, has made monumental contributions to the heavy metal genre. His influence extends across vocal style, stage presence, lyrical themes, and cultural impact, shaping the identity for heavy metal and inspiring countless musicians and fans. Here's a breakdown of Halford's legacy. Halford's voice is nothing short of legendary, known for his incredible range, effortlessly shifting from growling lows to piercing operatic highs. He redefined what a metal vocalist could be. Tracks like Victim of Changes and Painkiller showcase his ability to deliver both emotive melodies and blistering screams. His high-pitched wails became a defining feature of Judas Priest's sound and a blueprint for many vocalists in power metal, speed metal, and beyond. Halford elevated heavy metal performances with his dramatic and commanding stage presence. Whether riding a Harley Davidson onto the stage, a tradition he started during the Hellbent for Leather tour, or decked out in leather and studs, he turned concerts into larger-than-life spectacles. His charisma and ability to engage the audience set the standard for live performances in the genre. And with that leather appeal, Halford is credited with introducing the iconic leather and studs aesthetic to heavy metal. Initially inspired by the underground BDSM scene, his embrace of this style quickly became synonymous with the genre. This look not only shaped the visual identity of heavy metal, but also gave fans a unifying style to rally behind. As a lyricist, Halford explored themes that expanded heavy metal's narrative scope. Judas Priest songs range from tales of rebellion and empowerment, like Breaking the Law, which we'll definitely be hearing, to dystopian visions like Electric Eye, to personal introspection and resilience. His lyrics often strike a balance between accessibility and depth, resonating with fans on multiple levels. In 1998, Halford publicly came out as gay, becoming one of the first openly gay figures in heavy metal. His revelation shattered stereotypes about the genre's supposed hyper-masculine culture and paved the way for greater inclusivity. Halford's openness inspired countless fans, showing that heavy metal is a space for authenticity and individuality. Under Halford's leadership, Judas Priest became a cornerstone of the new wave of British heavy metal, influencing the evolution of heavy metal in the late 1970s and early 80s. Albums like British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance helped bridge metal's underground roots with mainstream success, bringing the genre to a wider audience. Halford's career spans more than 5 decades, and his ability to adapt while staying true to his roots is remarkable. From the hard rock of Judas Priest's early years to the blistering speed of Painkiller and his experimental solo projects like Fight and Halford, he has constantly pushed boundaries. Even in his 70s, Halford continues to perform at a high level, proving that metal has no age limit. Halford is a tireless advocate for the genre, often championing its artistic value and cultural significance. He has celebrated metal's diverse subcultures and fiercely defended its fans, calling them the best people in the world. His passion and eloquence has made him a spokesperson for the global metal community. Rob Halford's contributions to heavy metal are immeasurable. As a vocalist, performer and cultural icon, he has left an indelible mark on the genre, transforming it into a powerhouse of sound, style and spirit. He is, quite simply, one of the most important figures in the history of heavy music. British Steel catapulted Judas Priest into the mainstream, and Living After Midnight played a huge part in that. It became a radio staple, the kind of song you could blast at a dive bar or on a road trip, and everyone, metalheads or not, would instinctively sing along. The track was a perfect crossover hit, bridging the gap between the harder edges of metal and radio-friendly hooks that dominated the early 80s. Even now, the song is iconic. It's been covered by everyone from the LA Guns to the Donners, proving its staying power. It's appeared in video games like Guitar Hero and TV shows like The Simpsons. Think about that. A song written by British dudes about staying up late and causing mayhem is so universal that it resonates with cartoon characters and joystick-wielding gamers decades later. Living After Midnight isn't just a song. It's a mantra. It's a reminder that sometimes life's best moments don't happen under fluorescent lights or between 9 to 5. They happen in the after hours, in the afterglow, in the reckless, spontaneous and unfiltered minutes that stretch into dawn. Next up, we dive into the rare air where prog rock meets baroque bombast. A place where guitar solos duel harpsichord flurries and drum fills storm the heavens. A place named Sky. Specifically, we're talking about Toccata, the head-spinning single released in 1980 by this peculiar, criminally underrated Anglo-Australian supergroup. Is it chamber music? Is it rock? Is it the soundtrack to some quirky 80s computer game? You decide. This is track 5. If you've never heard of Sky, I forgive you, but only because that's what they'd want. Sky isn't the band you'd accidentally stumble upon while flipping radio stations. They're a group you'd discover in a dusty record bin sandwiched between Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And you whisper to yourself, who are these people? Let's lay out the roster. On lead guitar, John Williams. No, not that John Williams, not Star Wars John Williams, but the classical guitar virtuoso John Williams, who could shred his way through Bach like Eddie Van Halen shreds through Eruption. On harpsichord and keyboards, Francis Monkman, formerly of Curved Air, whose name alone sounds like he was destined to play instruments older than the light bulb. Bass duties, Herbie Flowers, the guy responsible for the iconic bass line in Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side. Kevin Peake, another virtuoso guitarist, handled the heavy lifting on rhythm, and Tristan Fry, the orchestral percussionist, manned the drums. Basically, Sky was a dream team of musicians who looked at the boundary between classical and rock music and said, what boundary? Enter Toccata. The song is Sky's jaw-dropping arrangement of Johann Sebastian Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Yes, that piece, the one that conjures images of caped organists in haunted castles. Sky took it, plugged it into an electric grid, and transformed it into something that sounds like Bach himself, showing off at a jam session in 1980s London. Toccata is a masterclass in how to honour the past while hurtling into the future. It opens with Monkman on the harpsichord, his fingers tantalising the keys faster than it should be humanly possible. The iconic opening riff is played with razor-sharp edge on electric guitar, while Flower's bass line pumps out a steady, pulsing undercurrent. It's a classical music piece, yes, but with the swagger of arena rock. The band doesn't just play Bach note for note, oh no, they explode it, bending time signatures, injecting solos, adding flourishes that make you forget this piece originally echoed through the 18th century cathedrals. There's a midsection where the music dips into this dreamy, spacey interlude, like Bach decided to take a cosmic vacation. Then it builds back up, layer upon glorious layer, until it bursts back into that unstoppable, triumphant theme. The single didn't exactly storm the charts. It peaked at number 5 in the UK, which feels both like a victory and a quiet day in the charts, but in hindsight, its legacy is undeniable. Toccata was proof that classical music wasn't dead or stuck in a museum. It could live, breathe and rock. It could get you headbanging in one moment and marvelling at its precision the next. Sky's Toccata is audacious, electrifying and frankly ridiculous in the best way possible. It's Bach on steroids, wearing leather pants and aviator shades. It's a piece of music that demands to be played loud, preferably on vinyl, preferably on a rainy night, with a candle flickering somewhere nearby for added drama. So here's your homework, dear listener. Go listen to Toccata, let it swirl around you, then call your nearest record store and see if they have a dusty copy of Sky 2, the double album from which it hails. Trust me, you'll thank me later. Next up, it's time for another debut, another star to shine. It's the debut of Sheena Easton. Specifically, we're talking about her breakthrough single, Modern Girl, the track that introduced the world to the Glaswegian with the voice of gold and an accent thick enough to melt the heart of any BBC producer. This is track 6, playlist 8. Modern Girl is a song about independence, ambition, and that elusive brand of 1980s empowerment that looked like a pencil skirt and sounded like a disco ball on overdrive. This was no damsel in distress ballad. No, this was Sheena's mission statement, a 3-minute manifesto for the working woman who doesn't have time for your games or your voicemails. She's got meetings to attend after all. This single was the prequel to the iconic 9 to 5 power anthem, a song we'll definitely visit. A sort of melodic head nod to a new decade of women who were leaning in decades before that phrase became an insufferable corporate meme. But before we get to the song itself, let's just zoom out and talk about Sheena Easton, because she didn't just waltz into stardom. No, her rise was a carefully orchestrated blend of talent, timing, and a touch of serendipity. Sheena Easton was born Sheena Shirley Orr on April the 27th, 1959 in Bells Hill, Scotland, a working-class town just outside of Glasgow. She was the youngest of 6 children, raised by her mother after her father passed away when Sheena was just 9. Music wasn't some passing interest for Easton, it was an escape. Inspired by Barbra Streisand's powerhouse vocals, she dreamed of a stage far removed from her modest upbringing. Sheena pursued her dream with laser focus. She enrolled at the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, where she studied speech and drama, but she wasn't just sharpening her skills for Shakespearean theatre, she was determined to sing. After a stint performing in local bands and club gigs, she caught the eye of a tutor who suggested she audition for The Big Time, a BBC documentary series that followed ordinary people chasing extraordinary dreams. Cue the plot twist and set everything in motion. The producers of The Big Time were captivated by Easton's talent and work ethic. Over the course of the show, which aired in 1980, viewers watched her journey from obscurity to the recording studio, and ultimately to the release of her first singles Modern Girl and 9 to 5. The programme was a hit, and so was Easton. Suddenly, she wasn't just a singer, she was a national sensation. The British public fell in love with her story and her voice and her undeniable charm. Modern Girl was the fruit of that labour, released shortly after the documentary aired. Written by Peter Vale, the song was tailored to Easton's crisp, emotive voice and her image as the fresh-faced go-getter who was every bit the modern girl she sang about. Clocking in at just over 3 minutes, it's pure distilled pop, all snappy drums, shimmering synths, and lyrics that feel like the opening montage of a rom-com about an up-and-coming advertising executive who can juggle deadlines and a disinterested boyfriend, but still gets her morning latte on time. She's a modern girl. She's been dreaming about it all day long. Sheena belts out with a clarity that cuts through the layers of production like sunlight through a rain cloud. And that chorus, hookier than a pirate convention, it's the kind of song that sticks in your brain after one listen, whether you want it to or not. Modern Girl was not an instant smash. It originally peaked at a modest number 56 on the UK charts, which, for anyone else, might have spelled doom, but not for Sheena Easton. Just a few months later, she released 9 to 5, retitled Morning Train in the US, and suddenly, Modern Girl got a second life. Re-released in the wake of Sheena Mania, it soared to number 8 on the UK charts and became a calling card for her career. In the States, Modern Girl didn't quite capture the same lightning in a bottle, overshadowed as it was by Morning Train. But let's not let that dampen its shine. What makes Modern Girl timeless is its perfect encapsulation of the late 70s, early 80s transition, when disco, new wave and synth pop collided in a shimmering, glorious mess of shoulder pads and self-confidence. Critics back then were predictably a mixed bag. Some hailed Easton as the new darling of British pop. Others were less enthused, dismissing her as too polished, too commercial. But hindsight is 2020, and it's clear now that Modern Girl was a song ahead of its time, a blueprint for every working woman power pop jam that followed. So here's to Modern Girl, the ultimate soundtrack for putting on lipstick in a compact mirror while also drafting a killer quarterly report. It's Sheena's world. We're just lucky they let us listen. Finally today, let's talk about My Perfect Cousin by the Undertones, one of the finest slabs of snark ever to shimmy its way onto vinyl. Released in April 1980, this track is peak Undertones, showcasing their uncanny ability to package teenage angst, sly humour, and a shot of pure punk energy into 2.5 minutes of brilliance. This is our track 7. Let's set the stage here. The Undertones were from Derry, Northern Ireland. A punk band, sure, but not just punk. They were punk's younger, mischievous siblings, imbued with an almost embarrassing sincerity and a love of pop melodies that owed as much to the 1960s bubblegum scene as it did to the Sex Pistols. By 1980, they'd already made a splash with their debut single Teenage Kicks, a song so good John Peel basically made it his epitaph. This success led to a deal with Sire Records, home to the Ramones and Talking Heads, giving them a global platform. While the band's Derry roots and scrappy charm set them apart from their more abrasive London punk acts, they resonated with fans hungry for pop melodies and delivered with punk energy. Their self-titled debut album dropped in May 1979, an effervescent collection of short, sharp shocks. Featuring tracks like Jimmy Jimmy and Here Comes the Summer, the record struck a balance between youthful exuberance and melodic precision. Critics loved it, and the album cracked the UK top 20. During this time, the Undertones gained a reputation for their live shows, which were as chaotic as they were fun. Fergal Sharkey's unique voice and the band's ability to mix punk with accessible, almost innocent pop hooks won them a growing fan base. But My Perfect Cousin was something different. It's a sarcastic takedown of a know-it-all family member, the titular cousin who is, to put it bluntly, a massive pain in the arse. Inspired by a real-life relative of the O'Neill brothers, John and Damien, the band's co-founders, this cousin isn't just better at everything, he's insufferable about it. Oh, and he's also got a degree in economics, mathematics and bionics, which may or may not be entirely true. Musically, My Perfect Cousin is a delight. It's powered by Damien O'Neill's sprightly guitar riff, which dances its way into your brain and sets up camp there. Michael Bradley's bass line is a masterclass in restraint, propelling the song forward without overshadowing the melody. And then there's Feargal Sharkey's voice. His distinctive, nasal, vibrato-laden delivery is the perfect vehicle for John O'Neill's lyrics, dripping with disdain and envy in equal measure. The song hit number 9 on the UK singles chart, making it one of the Undertones' most successful tracks, but the song's legacy is bigger than its chart position. It's a testament to the band's ability to take the mundanity of suburban life into something hilarious and oddly poignant. My Perfect Cousin is, at its core, a punk rock jab at the pressures of familial comparison and societal expectations. It's that universal frustration of never being quite good enough. Not to yourself, not to your parents, and certainly not compared to him. And the Undertones, with their irresistible blend of humour and pathos, captured that frustration in a way that was cathartic and deeply funny. My Perfect Cousin is the best response to smug superiority. It has a great riff, a sharp lyric, and a healthy dose of teenage rebellion. So now we're at the halfway point of playlist 8. Join us next time for Iconic Madness, an introduction to The Cure, and a call from Blondie. Please can I ask you to leave a review or rating on whatever podcast platform you use. It really helps things along. Until next time, take care.